1. The problem. Everyone is only looking at AI. You know. Whenever I look at semiconductor news these days, it feels like everything is about AI.
There's definitely a lot of it.
NVIDIA, HBM, data centers, and somehow, NVIDIA again.
That last one was a little lazy.
No, seriously. Sometimes it feels like every other semiconductor headline is about NVIDIA.
That's probably an exaggeration. But I get what you mean.
The other day, I clicked on an article about semiconductors. And once again, it turned into a story about AI data centers. At this point, I can't tell whether I'm reading about semiconductors, AI, or electric utilities.
Honestly, those industries are becoming more connected than ever.
But then I started wondering something.
What's that?
What's happening to all the other semiconductor markets?
Such as?
Smartphones, PCs, cars. You know, all the things that used semiconductors long before ChatGPT showed up.
That's actually a really good question.
Right? Because it feels like everything outside AI has disappeared.
And that's exactly why today's topic is interesting. A lot of people have started treating the semiconductor industry and the AI industry as if they're the same thing.
Aren't they?
Not even close. Now, don't get me wrong. AI semiconductors are incredibly important. Gartner expects global semiconductor revenue to exceed $1.3 trillion by 2026. And AI is one of the biggest reasons behind that growth.
$1.3 trillion. At some point, semiconductor numbers stopped feeling real.
I know.
When I was younger, I thought semiconductors were just tiny parts inside phones.
That's how most people saw them.
Now we're talking about trillion-dollar markets, AI infrastructure, and power shortages. The scale is completely different.
AI has turned semiconductors into one of the biggest stories in the global economy.
It's like the quiet kid in school suddenly became the most popular person in the class.
Interesting analogy.
And NVIDIA became the class superstar.
That's hard to argue with. But here's the important thing. The semiconductor industry isn't just AI.
That's the part people forget.
Semiconductors are inside smartphones, inside PCs, inside cars, inside factory equipment, inside communication networks. They're basically everywhere.
When you put it that way, semiconductors sound less like a product and more like modern infrastructure.
That's actually a pretty good way to think about it. Which means that just because AI is booming, it doesn't mean everything else disappeared.
Then what's really happening? Because honestly, smartphones and PCs don't exactly feel exciting these days.
And that's where the story gets interesting.
Let's be honest. Don't smartphones feel a lot less exciting than they used to?
I know exactly what you mean.
A few years ago, every new phone felt revolutionary. Better cameras, bigger displays, new features every year.
Today, the market is much more mature.
Now, when a new phone comes out, my reaction is usually, looks slightly better than the last one.
And that maturity affects semiconductor demand too. After the pandemic boom, both smartphone and PC markets went through a major inventory correction in 2022 and 2023. The recovery started in 2024, but the growth isn't nearly as explosive as AI data centers.
So they're not weak. They've just grown up.
That's actually a great way to describe it.
NVIDIA is the young superstar. Smartphones and PCs are the experienced veterans.
Please stop turning semiconductors into office workers.
You know it makes sense.
A little bit. Meanwhile, automotive and industrial semiconductors are a different story.
Automotive chips?
Cars are becoming more electronic every year. EVs, ADAS, driver assistance systems, digital displays, power management. All of these require semiconductors.
That's true. Modern cars feel very different from older ones.
They're getting closer and closer to computers on wheels.
Or giant smartphones with tires.
That's pushing it a little.
Still, have you seen the number of screens in some cars lately?
You do have a point, and that's why automotive semiconductors continue to grow. Even when vehicle sales slow down, the semiconductor content per vehicle keeps increasing.
So AI isn't the only thing supporting the industry.
Exactly. AI may be the star of the show right now. But if you want to understand the semiconductor industry, you have to look beyond AI.
Interesting. Then next, let's take a closer look at smartphones and PCs.
Exactly. Let's see whether those markets are actually recovering.
Part 2. Have smartphones and PCs really recovered? By the way, asterisk. When was the last time you bought a new phone?
Honestly, about 3 years ago.
See? Same here. I feel like people used to upgrade every couple of years.
That's true. New phone launches used to feel like major events.
Exactly. Better cameras, bigger screens, new features every year.
Today, it's more like, well, this one is a little better than the last one.
That's exactly it. My current phone still works perfectly fine. It's hard to justify replacing it.
And that became a major issue for the semiconductor industry. Remember the pandemic?
Of course,
People stayed home. They bought phones, tablets, laptops. Demand surged everywhere.
I bought a tablet back then,
Do you still use it?
mostly as an expensive YouTube machine.
That's a common outcome. The problem was what happened next. After the boom came the hangover. Between 2022 and 2023, the smartphone industry was flooded with excess inventory. Chip makers suffered too.
So everyone bought too much, too quickly.
Exactly. The future demand arrived early.
That sounds like borrowing from tomorrow.
That's actually a good way to describe it. But things have improved. According to IDC, the smartphone market has gradually returned to growth.
So smartphones aren't dead after all.
Not at all. They're just not growing like AI.
What about AI smartphones? I keep hearing that phrase lately.
Everyone does.
But if I'm honest, I'm still not entirely sure what makes a phone an AI phone.
You're not alone. Most consumers are still figuring that out. But manufacturers see AI as the next reason to upgrade. That's why Apple, Samsung, and Google are investing heavily in AI features.
So, instead of look at this amazing camera, it's now look at this amazing AI.
Pretty much.
Marketing never changes.
Only the buzzwords do.
And PCs?
Very similar story. Pandemic boom. Inventory correction. Recovery.
The semiconductor industry's favorite roller coaster.
That's surprisingly accurate. And there's another factor helping demand.
What's that?
The end of Windows 10 support. Many companies are finally replacing old PCs.
That makes sense. Some corporate laptops look like they survived multiple wars.
I've definitely seen a few of those. But the biggest topic in PCs right now is AI PCs.
There it is again. I knew AI would find a way back into this conversation.
It always does. Modern PCs are starting to include dedicated AI processors called NPUs. Intel, AMD, Qualcomm. Everyone is moving in the same direction.
But honestly, this still doesn't feel like the smartphone revolution.
That's the key point. The potential is enormous. But the killer application hasn't arrived yet. AI PCs are still in the early stages.
So, smartphones and PCs are alive, recovering, even. They're just not exploding like AI servers.
Exactly. And now we're about to move into a much more surprising market.
Which is,
Automotive semiconductors.
considering how many screens modern cars have, I have a feeling this is going to get interesting. Part 3. Are cars now computers on wheels? You know what I've noticed lately.
What's that?
Modern cars have way too many screens.
That's actually true.
The last taxi I took had a screen in front, a screen behind. A digital dashboard. At one point, I wasn't sure if I was riding in a car or a giant tablet.
The car industry might not appreciate that comparison.
But seriously, cars used to feel mechanical. Now they feel electronic.
And that's exactly why automotive semiconductors have become such an important market. Think about what a modern vehicle needs. Automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assistance, surround view cameras, radar systems, digital instrument clusters. Every one of those features requires semiconductors.
When you list them all like that, a modern car sounds more like a computer than a machine.
That's the direction the industry is moving. Even if global vehicle sales don't explode, the amount of semiconductor content inside each vehicle keeps increasing.
So the industry can grow even if people aren't buying dramatically more cars?
Exactly. That's one of the reasons investors pay close attention to automotive semiconductors.
Interesting. So the growth isn't just about selling more vehicles.
It's about putting more technology into every vehicle.
But isn't automotive growth mostly an EV story?
That's a common assumption. But it's not entirely true. EVs are important. However, even traditional vehicles are becoming more electronic. Safety regulations are increasing. Driver assistance systems are becoming standard. Consumers expect larger displays and more connectivity. All of that increases semiconductor demand.
So even when EV headlines slow down, the semiconductor story can continue.
Exactly.
I have to admit, this video is talking about AI a lot less than I expected.
That's because the semiconductor industry is much bigger than AI.
Honestly, it's kind of refreshing.
I think a lot of viewers probably feel the same way.
So where do Japanese companies fit into all of this?
Actually, this is one area where Japan remains very competitive. Renesas, Rome. A number of companies are deeply involved in automotive electronics.
That's good to hear. Because most semiconductor discussions these days are about the United States or Taiwan.
That's true, but the global semiconductor ecosystem is much broader than the headlines suggest. And then there's Sony.
The camera company?
More than that. As vehicles add more cameras, image sensors become increasingly important. They're used for parking assistance, driver monitoring, and advanced safety systems. That's another area where Japan has real strength.
You know, the more we talk about this, the more I realize semiconductors are everywhere.
That's what makes this industry fascinating. Everyone focuses on AI. But underneath the surface, automotive, industrial, and infrastructure markets are still evolving.
And I guess that brings us to the big question. If AI isn't the whole story, what's the next thing investors should be watching?
That's exactly what we're talking about next.
Part 4. What comes after AI semiconductors? You know, before we started this video, I honestly thought everything outside AI was struggling.
I can understand why.
Every headline is about AI. Every earnings call is about AI. Every stock chart is about AI. At some point, it starts feeling like the entire semiconductor industry became one giant AI trade.
That's a common perception.
But after everything we've talked about today, smartphones aren't dead. PCs aren't dead. Automotive semiconductors are still growing. The industry seems a lot healthier than I expected.
And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video. AI is growing so fast that it's overshadowing everything else. But overshadowing something and replacing it are two very different things.
That's a good point.
And now we get to the part I find most interesting.
Okay, let's start with networking. Why is everyone suddenly talking about it?
Because for years the conversation was all about computing power. How many GPUs? How much memory? How fast can we train models? Now a different problem is emerging.
Which is?
Moving all that data. Modern AI systems don't use one GPU. They use thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. And all those systems need to communicate with each other constantly.
So, the bottleneck isn't just computing anymore.
Exactly. The network is becoming just as important as the processor.
That's kind of like a city.
How so?
You can build more buildings, but if the roads can't handle the traffic, everything slows down.
That's actually a very good analogy.
Wow. 2 good analogies in one video.
Let's not get carried away.
So what about power semiconductors?
Personally, I think this is one of the most underrated areas in the industry.
Really?
Think about what's happening right now. Companies are building AI data centers everywhere. Governments are talking about power shortages. Utilities are preparing for rising electricity demand. And every one of those problems comes back to energy efficiency.
So the question isn't just how much power we generate, it's how efficiently we use it.
Exactly. That's where technologies like SiC and GaN become important. They're not as famous as GPUs. They don't get flashy headlines, but they help make entire systems more efficient.
So, they're the behind-the-scenes players.
That's a good way to describe them.
You know what's funny? At the start of this video, I thought we were talking about AI. Now, it feels like we were talking about modern society.
Because semiconductors are becoming part of everything. Transportation, communications, energy, manufacturing. AI is just one chapter of a much bigger story.
So what's your final takeaway?
I don't think the AI boom is ending anytime soon. But I also don't think the future belongs to only one company. 10 years ago, very few people expected NVIDIA to become one of the most valuable companies in the world. 5 years ago, very few people were talking about HBM. The next big winner may already be here. We're just not paying attention to it yet.
That's actually a pretty exciting thought.
That's what makes semiconductors so interesting.
Today definitely changed the way I look at this industry.
Mine too.
Thanks for watching.
See you in the next video.
Thanks for watching today's video. See you next time.